And then there was one, the final leg of the 2024 Triple Crown Series is upon us. It is the Belmont Stakes, and it is at Saratoga. A historic running of the Belmont Stakes, the final leg of the Triple Crown. And what we will be doing tonight is presenting to you a full rundown of 5 of the 15 stakes races on tap for this weekend as we handicap the Belmont Stakes using race lens and stat lines. I am Dan Tordjman with America's Best Racing, joined again by my good friends Corey Patton, CEO and co-founder of Pramana Labs, Christina Blacker from FanDuel TV, and of course Scott Coles, the 2019 National Horse Players Champion. This is a fully stacked weekend. I generally don't know where to start because we usually only do this on really big weekends, but this is the biggest of weekends, rivaled perhaps only by Breeders' Cup weekend. Christina, I'll kick it to you. Where are you in terms of your planning? Where will you be? How will you be handling all of this action this weekend?
Well, I'm glad that I've taken an advanced look at some of these races for us for this webinar because it's a lot to handicap, and I mean that in a very good way. Some stellar racing to look forward to through the entire festival, not just the Belmont Stakes itself. We will have Joaquin Jaime live on site for FanDuel, so I'll be back home kind of holding down the fort, adding whatever elements I can. I actually just finished a whole social media piece about the new bit that Sierra Leone is going to be using in the Belmont, which I think could really make a big difference. So really looking forward to it and to hopefully seeing the picture a little more clearly by the time we're done here tonight.
I love it. Well, I don't love that you're not going to be there, but I do love that you're so prepared as always. Corey, I know you're prepared. Tell me, and I think we've touched on this a little bit in our earlier shows, but in terms of your preparation, how do you narrow it down? Because I mean, you can't have extremely strong opinions in all 15 stakes races or all 60 races that are going to be run this weekend at Saratoga. How do you narrow it down? What is your process?
My process has always been try to find a super convicted horse that you just love amongst the stakes races and then build around it in the multi-race. Figure out where you think that you've got a horse that's got value that you can put all of your stuff together on and then kind of pretty well go deeper around it and then build your convictions and do your handicapping at a much deeper level at the races that are around that one so that you can create the most value from that horse that you single. Because you're right, you can't just go through every race, find a horse and fall in love. Okay, you have to find that second level conviction using stats, using traditional handicapping techniques, using Pramana Lab stat lines, using stuff that Christina and Scott says on here. But you really have to go deep and find yourself somewhere where you can take a stand throughout the card and then build your entire day around that.
And if you've got those convictions, listen closely because this show presented by FanDuel Racing and a special that will only last for a little while longer. New customers can make a no-sweat first bet of up to $500. That's if you sign up for FanDuel Racing. And we've got some knowledge dropped on us just before the show. If you've got a TVG account, you're still eligible. If you do not have a FanDuel Racing account, you can sign up and get that $500 no-sweat first bet. Save it for a race that either you're supremely confident in or maybe take a swing at a big long shot because it is a no sweat. So you can also get your money back and then use your money back for your sure thing, however you want to play it. There are also two $99 specials right now on Equibase. You can get unlimited quarterly past performance subscriptions for just $99. Promo code TCEQB99. TCEQB99, $99 for a quarterly past performance subscription. And also you can get unlimited quarterly access to Race Lens for $99 using promo code TCRL99. We will come back to those codes and you are absolutely going to want to use them once we show you all of the features inside Race Lens, as well as cover off on all the angles that we get via Corey through the stat lines from Pramana. So let's kick things off in race 5 on Saturday. At this point, you have hopefully still managed your budget well, and you've built on your initial bankroll, and you're ready to fire because this would be the moment now that if Scott's had a drink or two, he may let his emotions get the best of him because he has already conceded to us that this is more than just a horse to him. This is a love affair. Scott, tell us about Casa Creek.
Yeah, just so many cool moments over the years, and you don't see a lot of horses that you love still running at 8. So I just think it's pretty awesome. It's great for the sport and gets back to a place where he loves. He's 4 wins and 3 2/3 out of 6 starts at Saratoga on the turf, and it's just one that catches my eye. And even though he's made the 9-5 favorite, I feel like you're gonna get that or more unless there's that many people love him like I do, just because of the names of the trainers in here. There's, Charlie Appleby's in here, Chad Brown's in here. You should get value on this horse, and I think I can excuse the last race in Maidan and then the gauntlet that he went through last year. I mean, gets some major class relief compared to what he's been running in the last 3. You see some crazy names, and he still, had a great year. So we'll see what he's got left at 8. I really want to verify it with the clocker reports and just make sure, but the works look solid based on numbers that he's ran before and where he's at now. But you never know until I'd like to hear the clockers or Christina's opinion on how the horse has been doing, just whichever one I get first. And it's just the horse I love, and I just feel like this is the perfect trip, the perfect race course, and just I'm hoping that there's just at least enough pace, or he's close enough to just make a big run and have one last season that's and with a bunch of wins. So looking forward to it.
Yeah. Do you think Carl Spackler, the 3 horse, is the heir apparent, 2 for 2 at Saratoga? 4 years old only. Who knows? Maybe a mini Casa Creed here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the horse is very scary, obviously. I mean, any horse that's around the 3 or 4 years old age and getting better likes the track. I mean, the improvement is unlikely to be there for Casa Creed, whereas the horses like that are going to get better. So hoping that he gets them that day. But there's plenty of horses that fear in here. Don't get me wrong. It was not going to be a crazy play of mine. It's more nostalgia and just love of the horse. But I just think it is a great spot also because, like I said, because of the big names, and I think you're going to get fair value for a horse that loves this race, absolutely loves this racetrack. So.
All right, I like it. And look, last time we talked about betting with your gut, although we don't do that most of the time. In fact, we're going to get into some numbers and all the data here in a moment. But when we talked about betting with your gut, we talked about betting crabs and beer on Preakness Day. And what happened, guys? What happened? Was it 20 to 1? 20, what was it? 25 to 1, finished second like it was nothing. They just, you have a name like crabs and beer. It's in the air. You're in Maryland. You're going to run well. So Casa Creed, there's something in the air in Saratoga. Always runs well there. So it's going to be exciting to watch. And again, just to do it in June, it's going to be surreal. Any time of year at Saratoga, Casa Creed, it's home. So we are all excited to watch the Poker Stakes. We are also excited to watch the 9th race, which is the next race we will dive into. And it is the Jaipur Stakes, 5.5 furlong turf sprint. And for this race, I think we've collectively landed essentially on the same horse. Christina, I will let you get started first and tell us a little bit about the number 12, Mischief Magic.
Yeah, I think we have, of all the options, right? We had sort of the 3 big races that we agreed to all dive into, and then just to pick a little extra something about a horse that we were looking forward to. And this is the horse that I landed on, and I know Corey's in agreement. I like the 12, Mischief Magic. Charlie Appleby has 2 in the race, but it's really down to him gelding this horse recently. He runs as a gelding for the first time, and we saw him finishing second in the Shakertown at Keeneland, and then by 3 lengths in the turf sprint at Churchill on Derby Day last time out. I find it interesting that with the 2, William Buick ends up here on Mischief Magic. Flavian Pratt is on the other runner, but Buick is their go-to guy. And I think with those changes, it's probably something they've wanted to do for a while with this horse. And you look at his works in the morning since the gelding, which was after the race at Churchill Downs, he comes back nice and easy on May the 18th. Nothing, crazy there. The first sort of after the adjustment for him. And then at Saratoga, 48-2 over their turf course on June the 1st. I love that coming into the race. So Mischief Magic is going to be the horse that I'm going to look at as hopefully holding on to a bit of a price and just maybe some value in the Jaipur.
All right, Corey, I think you want to add to this case a little bit.
I completely agree with where Christina went, and she did that. Obviously, we didn't even confer, and within minutes, we realized we had the same horse, the same race, the same angle. You know, they would say great minds think alike, except hers is far greater than mine in the horse racing world. But what I liked about him was several things. One, obviously the gelding, and I'll talk about that in a second. But when I mentioned you're going to find a horse that you just say, okay, layers, layers, I really like it, and there's conviction, this is the one. This is one that I'm really going to try to build some tickets around because I think there's value there. I mean, you get, you know, Charlie Appleby and Buick together, you know, you're at 8-1 all day long. I'm going to the window, right? I think also, hopefully it's a firm course a little bit. So it's not, he's just had a lot of kind of soft courses he's had to run off and make up a bunch of ground on recently. And you know, the last time he had a firm, you know, turf sprint course in the United States, it was back at Keeneland in November of 2022. So hoping that, and he ran them all down and won that day. I'm hoping he can get some, you know, some firm sod under his feet to run against. But, you know, I started handicapping and then I said, okay, how does the 12 post affect this race at 5.5 furlongs in the turf at Saratoga? And it actually is tied for the second highest winning percentage of all posts at 5.5 furlong sprints over the last 30 years on the turf at Saratoga. So at 13% winning percentage. So that's not bad. So you don't have to look at that at all. He'll have the whole outside to navigate himself and circle around. But I think what Christina said is that's the magic angle, the gelding, right? And Charlie Appleby did this off the last stakes race. And I found an interesting stat using Pramana Labs stat lines tool that when I asked it which trainer wins the most with first-time geldings in stakes races, over the last 30 years, Charlie Appleby, 70% of the time. And that's hard to ignore, right? 7 out of 10, 9 times in the money at 8-1. And he's made this move that many times before with a, you know, winner circle move at the end. I'm running to the windows on this one, and I'm hoping he gets something to run at. And I think there's enough pace to do it. So I'm all in. I'm going Mischief Magic and trying to get that 8-1 or at least close to it.
Wow. So that stat on the 12 post being, you said what, the second or third best?
Second. Yeah, it's tied for the second best. So only the 4 post has won more at 15%, but there's 4 other horses tied at 13%. And it goes all the way down to the 7 horse doesn't do great. But it's a really interesting number that I didn't expect to find when I went to look at the post position in that distance race on the turf at the spot.
That's interesting. Wow. Okay. The 8 horse Cogburn is the morning line favorite at 2-1. A little bit of experience at Saratoga, won the Troy last year, going 5.5 furlongs over soft ground. I guess it's a good time, and as I mentioned, soft ground. You know, take all this with you know with sort of a grain of salt, in that we are recording this a few days ahead of time, and the forecast does have you know, potentially some rain ahead. And so, you know, these races, I mean, the race shape could change. Obviously, you want to go back and kind of look at some of these horses that have run better or worse over soft ground. And you know, it's funny, we look at some of the European horses. Obviously, you know, a lot of those horses were sent here looking for firm ground, and so you might be concerned. But you know, I think the case you made is a compelling one. Appleby also has the 6 horse Star of Mystery. Did you all take a look at that one? Any thoughts or feelings on this Appleby? And if not, it's fine.
I thought he was interesting, but I also think, you know, some of the horses, of course, he's in the Alquaz sprint, that, you know, huge effort. He was second by 3/4 of a length. But overall, I'm not sure he's kept the top class company throughout his career as some of the other Charlie Appleby horses that we'll see throughout the weekend.
Cool. Okay. Good. All right. Well, this is an interesting race, as is the next one. So we're going to kind of go sequentially here until we get to the Belmont Stakes. We're going to go to the Met Mile, race 10. I saw a lot of people sort of expressing angst and frustration over Memorial Day weekend that the Met Mile was on Belmont Stakes Day again. for the for the old school, for the purists, for the old time fans. Obviously a little different to see the Met Mile, but I feel like it's been a while now. What are we, like in year 10 or 12 of the Met Mile being on Belmont Stakes weekend? Scott, this is oh no, this is Christina. Christina, back to you on this one. We're highlighting National Treasure. Is this where you landed?
This is where I landed, and I'm still kicking myself for not picking him in the Pegasus. I just felt like it was all right there staring me in the face. And I know he came back to finish fourth in the Saudi Cup last time out. I like the fact that he's had plenty of time since that race back in February for the travel, to get back, to freshen up a little bit. And you look at just overall the campaign, 8 straight grade ones for National Treasure. I mean, they have not dodged anybody with this horse. You also notice, if you look at his form, the blinkers coming on and off and on and off. And part of the reason that I ended up being so frustrated with myself for not kind of realizing it was all coming together with him for the Pegasus is that Bob Baffert has always talked about this horse all the way back to his 2-year-old season as being one of the most talented that he brought in that year, but just the horse that was going to get better with age, the horse that hadn't quite figured it out yet. And when he did, he was going to be a real force to be reckoned with. And I think we've got to that point with him. I also look back at sort of the fraction it's in his debut, because I don't think we have a whole lot of early speed in here. And Bob Baffert, when he goes east, very often he puts his horses right on the lead. He does it on the West Coast too, but certainly employs those tactics back east. And you see how quick he can be. He can go 21-4, 44-1. I'm not saying he's going to need to go that fast, but I think if they want to put him on the lead, they're able to do that. Or if he wants to be right off, another horse in the early stages, he's going to have no problem with that. I pulled some individual research on Bob Baffert, but when you're talking about, the trainers like Bob, trainers like Brad Cox, trainers like Chad Brown, they're high in so many different categories. So I think some of the background and just realizing how this horse got to this point is really meaningful. 8 wins and 28 starts in graded stakes in New York on this circuit, 29% win clip there, 46% in the money. And you can see some of the horses, Gamine, Improbable, Arabian Lion, Fort Bragg. These are brilliant horses that he's brought back there. I've watched his training in the morning. I think he's grown even since the beginning of the year. I really love what I'm seeing from him in the mornings. The other horse that I wanted to just touch on is just to his outside in Post Time. Post Time is a horse that has a really strong lifetime record. He's 8 for 10 lifetime, but he hasn't quite been tested, and he's been a little bit more carefully campaigned in that this is his first step up in against graded stakes competition. You go to the to the True Odds page, and one of the things that kind of jumps out at you is the fact that he does have the fastest late pace figure of the field. He looks a little bit difficult to manage. Sheldon Russell knows him well, has ridden him pretty much throughout his career and does a great job handling him. But I think he's just kind of all over the place down the stretch sometimes. But it's because he's going so fast and he's coming under such a big head of steam. I've started looking at the GPS data a little bit more since we were last together talking about the Preakness, and you guys touching on it and Scott touching on it quite a bit. And then I started looking at these finish times and just the last, what is it, eighth of a mile, last couple 16ths of a mile that he's finishing, 37.01 in his last race, average speed, 37.07 in his race 2 back at Aqueduct. And then I compared those to National Treasure. And National Treasure, I'm not taking anything away from his form, but he's not finishing as quickly, right, as Post Time is. So Post Time's going to come running. And I am, worried about this horse. I do think he's going to be really rolling down the middle of the track. But I'll pick National Treasure because I think he can slow it down on the front end. And I think he's capable of going, as quick as they need to kind of run some of those horses off their feet and put enough of a distance on them and be able to hold on.
Always support you giving some love to the Maryland horses. I love that. And Brittany Russell, Sheldon Russell, Hillwood Stable, the Maryland bred Post Time. That would be a really cool story. I wonder how much fear there is. White Barrio, Corey, I know you want to speak, but hold on. I know you want to talk White Barrio. We're going to go to Scott real quick for a little bit more on National Treasure and your position on this one. You're on board with Christina, am I right, Scott?
Yeah, absolutely. Just probably have a lot of the same, so I'll try not to say too much about the similar thoughts we had, but just some other things you can look at. you look at how this race projects out, and you can use their pace projector, but the beauty of it is the eyeball feature. And I'll tell you right now, I do not agree at all that Blazing Sevens will be on the lead. So when I'm looking at this race, I'm just taking that horse out. And because I don't have a feature where I can move him where I think he should be, I just take him out so I kind of get a better feel. Either they switch Blazing Sevens and hoist the gold, or they just, I don't know, because of some of the shorter races, maybe they think Blazing Sevens is going to go. I don't know what the formula is, but it's the nice thing about it is that you have the option to kind of remove and get a better picture. And at the bottom there, you kind of see that the pace projects to be a slow one. Even without you take Blazing Sevens, theoretically he's even slower, which I think is a huge advantage to National Treasure. If you go to the PPs, and since Pratt's taken over, I mean, he gave a great ride on the lead in the Breeders' Cup mile, and then got ran down by one of the greatest milers we've ever probably seen in Cody's Wish. I mean, that horse is ridiculous, and it was barely got there. And then was able to press, as Christina talked in the her nightmare day, where was able to press in the Pegasus. But I mean, so Pratt has done a great job of kind of doing what you need to do with this horse, knowing that you have options. If Hoist the Gold wants to just run off, then he can sit off. If he doesn't, he can take the lead. And as Christina mentioned, Bob will put his horse in the race immediately. And I just think that is just gonna be a big problem for everyone in a 6-horse field without much pace other than that. I like White Abar as a horse a lot. I mean, that was my Breeders' Cup horse. It was a great day. I just thought it was awesome. I'm just worried that National Treasure has such an advantage. And as she already mentioned, I think post time is getting really good. I just don't think we know. So you're trying to use data, but again, that's another horse that kind of just needs more pace to run at than this. I think to be a really strong player, but could be a little bit more forward. I thought that was a goofy ride last time out, but the horse likes to come from far back. So because of all that, I'm going to probably try to single National Treasure on a lot of tickets just because of the pace. I mean, that's just where I got.
All right, Corey. How does White Abar overcome the pace disadvantage in this race?
I'm going to be really transparent. I don't love this race. I'm not in love with this one. But I do think it does come down to National Treasure and White Abar. I just think that they kind of tower over this field. I agree with Christina in that, post time is just not quite the class. I don't think it's had the seasoning. It's a big step up really against these class horses. I mean, look at the number of grade ones that White Abar and National Treasure have run in over the last couple of years. It's just insane, right? So they're definitely the class of this field. I just think actually White Abar is a classier horse. It's a better horse. I know that the pace doesn't set up exactly right, but I do think that White Abar will sit a little bit closer potentially. And really, when you go back to last year's Whitney, that 6-horse field, White Abar not only overcame the 6-horse field, but just looked awesome doing it. And that 122 Equibase Speed Theory ran in that race. It's still the fastest dirt figure for any horse in North America since the beginning of 2023. That's a big figure, okay? So whether that was true or not, he validated it in his next effort, clearly. So he also ran in the Met Mile, last year in his first race for Dick Dutrow. Didn't win, but third to Cody's Wish and Zandon's no disgrace. So I wouldn't say that was a terrible performance. I don't know what happened, in the Saudi Cup. I have no idea. That just wasn't great. Hopefully he comes back and he's the same horse. But I just am trying to go off a class here. And I'm going to show a couple of interesting, weird morning line oddities that I know are not great in handicapping, but sometimes they're interesting to look at, right? So Dick Dutrow Jr. has had 2 stakes runners at morning line 6-5 at Saratoga in the last 33 years. He's won with both of them. He's 2 for 2. By the Light in 2008 in the Union Avenue Stakes and Ice Cool Kitty in 2007 in the Saratoga Deuce Stakes. So he's got a 6-5 shot today. When he's got a stakes runner at Saratoga in morning line 9-5 or less, he's 8 for 12, so 67% of the time. So when he gets horses that are in stakes races and the morning line is favorable, he converts on them. And I like that, when horses aren't money burners from morning lines like that. And National Treasure's got every right to come in second and every right to win the race. And perhaps he gets out there and something goes wrong and he just doesn't complete the task, and maybe Obario comes running. And so I had to look at a couple of other horses because that's just a boring race, right? If you get a 6-5 and an 8-5 from a wagering standpoint, from a racing standpoint, beautiful race. Wagering, you want a little bit of value. And I looked at Blazing Sevens a bit for Chad Brown because I'm not sure what's going on with the last race. He looked good, stepped up in class big time here. This is a big step up, but he's 8-1 morning line in here. And I'm going to stay on the oddities thing. It's weird when you find Chad Brown with a bad stat, and I seem to find one each time we do this just because it's fun. He's 0 for 24 lifetime in stakes races at Saratoga with an 8-1 morning line horse. So it's the only, I mean, that's just stands out when you look at that chart on the screen, right? So for what you put into morning lines, that's an interesting stat, right? But put that off to the side. I kind of like the form. In the last race, I think he'll take a big jump forward here, second off that super long layoff for Chad Brown, and you can't really throw anything out. But probably not likely enough to threaten Obario or even National Treasure, really. He's got a win over the track, finished in the money all 3 trips here at Saratoga. So I'm going to try to take a chance here with a 6-4 cold exacta, and maybe I can get National Treasure to run out.
Wow. How do you even have that stat? What is that stat? Over 24?
What, the morning line stat? That's
Yeah.
Pramana app. That's what we can do. You can scan through every single morning line and figure out what trainer, condition, jockey, surface, distance, track, and have it kind of give you a bit of an idea of when horses are a certain morning line at certain tracks, and those morning lines makers know what's going on in the mornings and workouts. You don't want a trainer that burns money that way. And this is an interesting way to look at the race sometimes when you come up with other stats in a 6-horse race that you just need coverage on.
So we've moved off the screen. I mean, I wanted to see that again because there was like I was just, I envisioned like having like one of those Zach Galifianakis moments where like all the numbers were moving around, and but I want to see that again. That is such a cool feature because I mean, look, I know it shouldn't make a difference, but like over 24 feels significant. So that's cool that you pointed that out. And I didn't realize that was even a possibility. That was something you could even search for. So
Yeah.
very, very cool. Okay, so Blazing Sevens, we've talked post time. This is a really interesting race. I mean, I just want to go back to Christina and Scott for a moment. If you're gonna, I know both of you play pick 4s and pick 5s, but I mean, if you're just betting this race straight up, and National Treasure is even money, I mean, do you sit out? Is there an exacta you like? Is there exacta you just totally you pound? I mean, what do you guys think?
I think post time is the horse you use underneath. I think he gets a piece of it. I don't know that he's good enough to win, and I think we've all kind of come to agreement on that. But I think he's just going to come rolling down the middle of the racetrack, and I think you'll get hopefully that 7-2 on him to maybe help out, if not better, some of the other runners in here price wise.
Yeah, I talked about taking finding a horse you love and hooking up around it. So I'm gonna go from the Jaipur into this with Mischief Magic and to White Obario National Treasure, and feel like I get my 8-1 on Mischief Magic. I feel pretty comfortable going into this race.
I like that, the double. Okay. Scott, what are you doing?
It's gonna be price dependent on contest for me, and then as far as betting, it's not gonna be I don't think it's gonna be a big play of mine. I might try to cold deck a try and just kind of either play National Treasure over White Obario and post time, but then I mean that's as chalky as it gets, or like Christina said, maybe get post time into second if White Obario's just not quite right. Not a very exciting race for me. And then you have Dallas Stewart, who everybody will guess that Hoist the Goal is going to go, and then Dallas Stewart's the king of taking third or fourth and ruining all the tries and supers by holding his horse back and getting a late lead. So like in a 6-horse field, it's just you'd have to get super creative. So I'm more interested in the multis and the contest plays and just kind of using National Treasure and moving on.
Well, that's fair. A little something for everybody. That's great. And of course, you'd be an overachiever, jump straight to the straight try. No, but I found especially on Preakness weekend, because we did our Preakness show, and I just wasn't having much luck. I was just I was kind of wheeling horses, I was keying horses in tries and this and that. You know what? Let me simplify this, and I just started like just absolutely just doing like, you know, $40, $50 exactas. I mean, obviously you want to look at the, you know, at the probables, right? Just figure out what you're going to be getting. But I was like, you know what? This is why have I not been doing more of this? Like, why am I complicating things? Like, why am I betting so many pick fours, pick fives? Like, you wait for the race and you just hammer an exacta. I mean, I don't know. That's kind of, I'm coming off of Preakness where that works for me. So that of course can change this weekend. But that certainly works for me. If you find a race, even in a small race like this, you bet a $40, $50 exacta, you might get, you know, 8-1. That's not bad, right? I mean,
Yeah,
that's the way to
absolutely. I
approach
mean,
it.
money is money. I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the trying to be the hero or make a ton or cover way too many horses when oftentimes exactas, doubles, win bets are the way to make money. I mean, over the long run, certainly. I mean, you're not gonna have a high hit rate on pick sixes and pick fives. I mean, it's tough to do, and you can go through some really big cold streaks.
Mm. Yeah, and good news, by the way, as we told you, FanDuel Racing sponsoring this show, offering that $500 no sweat first bet. You can do any bet. So if you wanted to take a shot on an exacta, even a $500 exacta or a $250 exacta box, you could do it. And if you miss, you'll get your money back. Don't miss though on this race because you've got two pretty firm opinions here. National Treasure and well, actually, and Corey's not really.
No.
He's kind of he go either way on this, but National Treasure, White Barrio, those are your two horses. And if you want a little something extra underneath, maybe post time is the consensus here, I think. But we'll go to race 11. This race I think is a little bit of a bigger field, 9 horses. There are 2 Chad Browns, only 2 Chad Browns in the Manhattan, and there are 2 Charlie Appleby's. And Christina is going with none of those horses. She's like, don't give me Appleby, don't give me Chad Brown, give me Joseph O'Brien.
When you put it that way, it sounds more risky, doesn't it? So yeah, I do really like one of the Chads. I love program training, but Al Rifa is going to be my top selection in here. And I'm just looking at this horse's kind of body of work, and you look at that return race. So you just look at the spacing of his last couple of races, right? He last raced in April of this year at Longchamp in the Prix Gannet. That's a Group 1 event, and it was over soft going. And we know that soft ground at Longchamp is an absolute bog. That is difficult to get over. So bringing a horse back from August to April in a race over soft ground at 1.5 miles is just grueling. He ends up 4th by a neck. You're definitely going to gain a ton of fitness from that. And I think he really showed a lot of class in the race. But what the race that really sold me on Al Rifa is the race 2 back at Deauville back in August, where he was second to Ace Impact. And if you want to go back and look at that replay, it's available on YouTube. You can also see it on the TVG website. But if you watch him, he finishes stride for stride with Ace Impact. And if you haven't kept up with a lot of international racing, you know, just from last year, Ace Impact was 6 for 6. He was the world's best rated 3-year-old with a time form 128. He was just shy of Equinox with his rating, and he finished the arc to round out his season and to round out his career, coming home in 33.05. I mean, the horse was absolutely electric. So I think Al Rifa is really, really talented and was second right there behind a very, very good horse. I also look at those Equibase speed figures, and you'll notice he's rated 122 off that last race. It was a really nice effort for him. I compared that with the other Euro to the far outside who's measured time, the 9, who I think will get a lot of attention. And you'll notice that he earned a 122 in the Dubai Turf. So that kind of validates, I think, what you're getting from that last performance with Al Rifa and the fact that he could be an improving 4-year-old and just moving up at a time like this. There's not a whole lot of numbers behind Joseph O'Brien here, you know, stateside. He does tend to team up with John Velasquez quite a bit, I noticed, just in kind of doing some digging. Johnny V seems to be kind of his go-to rider here. He always brings these horses over for the big days in New York, but he's usually kind of a price like this horse. He's 6-1. So you have 2 wins and 11 starts, but you also have 5 horses in the money, 45% in the money. So he comes over and he often gets a piece of it. That median win price, 24.40. When these horses connect, they connect at a big price. So Alrifa is going to be my top selection. I do really like program trading. I loved him on Derby Day. I think he's the best of the Americans. And he also came back with a really ambitious return. I think Chad Brown has all the confidence in the world in this horse. And if any of the Americans are going to get it done, it's program training. But I'll take Alrifa and hope for that 6-1. And just as one of a really exciting, improving 4-year-old this year.
Well, you passed the baton quite nicely to Scott on program trading. Scott, that's the one you're on, I believe.
Yeah, I'm got a lot of good information on Alrifa that I didn't have, so I'm really happy about that because I plan on using quite a few in here. But yeah, I landed on program trading. If we go to the true odds, we'll talk about the race projection, and it's another one that kind of projects to be a slower pace, and you see program trading is the 5 and expects to be right up there on it, and that's a spot that I really want to be in a slow pace, especially on this day. So really like that. Really like that it's if you sort by the late pace and you kind of look, he's third with the 113 late pace, but the other two have got that S, so they're going to be coming from a lot farther back than program trading will. So that's a really good late pace number for how close program trading likes to be, especially expecting him to improve. So, and then if you go to the PPs, we'll kind of just look at the replay. And this is a day that, if you guys remember on the first video, I was on Naval Power and I said program trading is the one I was scared of. And of course, program trading is the one who knocked him out of all my multi-bets. So, it happens, but you just didn't know because it had been away for so long. But you kind of look at the start, and we're looking at the 5 horse and did get a slight stumble. So having to rush up and kind of take those awkward steps for your first start and forever is kind of a tough challenge, kind of getting squeezed here a little bit, and works really hard to get all the way up to be right on the pace. And then kind of just, works out a pretty good trip from there. And we'll look at turning for home. There's a lot to be impressed about. Like I said, Naval Power is the 11 there, as you can see on the screen. And this, you can thank Churchill for all the Derby Day hoopla that is blocking our replay right now. But so here we'll go with the 11 kind of coming around, gets first run. And like I said, Naval Power is no joke and a great horse. And the 5, like, he has to make a decision here, kind of gets stuck, doesn't get the first time he wants, and ends up all the way on the rail. But for a horse, first start as a 4-year-old to show that much fight, continues to get jammed further and further onto the rail and just kind of persevere through all of this, and is disappointed I was on the day. That's a lot. And it continues to gallop out extremely well. There are so many things to like about that horse, assuming the horse is able to improve. But everything about that performance was exciting. Yeah, it was a slower pace. So, there was advantage of being close, but didn't exactly have it his own way, and was running down a horse that I thought, like I said, a horse that I couldn't believe did not kick away. So, I was very, very impressed by that effort. So now I'm joining the bandwagon, and I just think that there's a couple things to mention that I think is cool about Racelands, kind of like what Corey was mentioning, where it's hard to find negative angles on Chad Brown. It's also hard to find negative angles on Red Ortiz, but in the past 2 years, riding at Saratoga on the turf course at 1 1/8 or greater, he's 0 for 15. That shocked me. Hits the board plenty, so maybe you can talk about I'm very busy hitting the board as much more likely, but to be 0 for 15 in the last 2 years for him, I know he's always running in the top races against top competition, but that was a little bit surprising to me. So I think that's just like the power of Racelands, is you can just kind of go that deep and kind of look for spots that maybe you don't want Red Ortiz, that you're already paying what a lot of people call the red tax. Like you're paying a premium to bet on a red no matter what horse he's on. So he's not going to be ever going to be a great price or value, and to kind of be able to fade a horse of his helps. And then I also looked at a positive angle in this race for Charlie Appleby in the past 5 years, which we've talked about Appleby quite a bit already, but he's just kind of crazy when he's come over here, but especially in this circuit in New York. So Saratoga, Belmont, Aqueduct, Belmont, or BAQ as they call it. But 35% wins in the last 5 years with a big ROI and a success score is pretty crazy. I mean, that's just, and hitting the board at a ridiculously high clip. I mean, he's been a machine. So I feel like he always sends his best ones to New York when he's out of the ones he wants to send over. And I feel like, there's 2 in the race there. You have the 7 Nations Pride, who will be close to the pace, which is a big advantage. And then we have Measured Time, which was already mentioned with Buick up. So I mean, both horses, along with Christina's, I feel like you need to take a strong look at all of them. I'm gonna probably play it as like an A situation, hoping that program trading improves, but I'm not going to leave out the European horses. I mean, I just feel like you'd be foolish to do so on the turf. So kind of going to make those B, maybe press one up to an A, depending on what replay work and workouts come. But that's how I see it. It's a very tough race, but I'm hoping program trading is able to get the jump on all of these horses with insanely great kick.
The night of negative stats, Scott. Very interesting. You found one IRAD. I think that's the first time ever on this show that we found a negative IRAD stat.
Tough to do.
Of course,
emphasize, but I mean, it's over 15, so
yeah. Corey, I think you got a nice little setup again from Scott here on Nation's Pride. I think you could add to the case.
I love it. I love the segues we're unintentionally building into this show. But yeah, I'm going to go back on the Charlie Appleby bandwagon. I'm going with the number 7 Nation's Pride. I've always loved that horse. I think that horse has got a ton of talent. Obviously Appleby's got 2 in here, so we'll have to see. But Frankie had the ride last time, and I think he needed it. I think he needed that race last time in the Man of War tremendously after being off since November of last year, coming back from Bahrain. I mean, he ran up close. He didn't have the kick in the end he needed, briefly kind of took the lead and then got headed and lost decently in that race. But I think he needed it, and I think that was all part of the plan for Charlie Appleby. But as I mentioned a minute ago, Bahrain, this horse just runs everywhere. If you look at those PBs, just since April 2022, Nation's Pride has run in 6 different countries and at 10 different tracks. It's ridiculous, right? His only race over the Saratoga sod, he won that Saratoga Derby in August of 2022, so he has a 1:15 figure. Clearly, he knows how to do it. It was also 1 mile and 3/16 distance, same as the one here. So likes the track, likes the surface, has proven it before. I really think that credible 3rd in the Man of War at Belmont of the Big A with that 112 is setting him up off the long way off for a really best effort coming up on Saturday here at Saratoga. I really think that's the horse to beat. I don't have a ton of stat lines to back it up because I don't really need it. It's Charlie Appleby. It is second off the long way off in a spot where I think this horse is primed to sit close to the pace and come, and run his butt off in the lane and win the race and hold everybody else off. I'm going to use underneath where I think I might get a tiny bit of value. The 9-2 is good enough. I'll take that if I can get it. But underneath, the one horse, I'm very busy at 9-2. I'll take that all day long with a horse that was fractious in the Turf Classic. Might have partially lost his rate in the race in the gate that day. He was the 2-1 favorite when the gates opened. And as Scott was talking about it, he said it might not have been the fastest pace. Well, it wasn't. Let's go ahead and be honest here. So the 49 and change, the 114, 138, 150, yeah, that's not great. And the 49.51 quarter was the 9th slowest half in Turf Classic in the last 35 editions. The 114 was the 7th slowest. The 150 final time was the 9th slowest in the last 35 running. So I think that he was compromised by being a little too far back, had a lot of ground to make up front with that slow tempo. And I think strong quality in here will probably ensure a little bit of a decent pace. So I don't think that Pride will have to come from that far off either. And I don't think, because Pride will be back a little bit, but I think I'm very busy, won't be compromised by the pace scenario that he was in the Turf Classic last time. So if I can get 9-2, I feel like that's pretty good exacta to play. And with that said, I'm going to toss the favorites. You got to take a stand somewhere, right? So I'm going to toss program trading. I know Scott made a great case for him, and yes, that day on the rail coming through was a really impressive finish in that race. And getting through on the rail is tough for a horse that's getting better and better. But I think he benefited from that very weak pace, and I'm going to go ahead and stand by that. And I think they've got Pride, and I'm very busy having a little bit more class and at a better price. So you got to flip that. And then Measured Time. I know Christina likes that horse a little bit, and it's hard not to like with Charlie Appleby and William Buick, but I just have to wonder how much that trip for Maidon can really compromise the horse's performance with that long trip. And I also think post 9 is going to be a little bit of a barrier, because when I mentioned the post earlier for the Turf Classic, post 9 only gets 8% winners at a mile or greater on turf at Saratoga over the past 10 years. So not the best post position to be for that horse. So I'm going to try to toss them and try to beat them with I'm Very Busy and Nation's Pride. And that's where I'm going to take a stand.
Nice. I like I'm Very Busy. You brought up the fractious and the gate, because I was trying to make sense of that last race there. But man, those 2 races prior are pretty massive.
Yeah.
You got the win in the Grade 2, the Muniz at Fairgrounds, and a really nice effort, obviously in the World Pegasus World Cup Turf. I mean, geez, and maybe this horse gets overlooked. I'm sorry, Scott. I know Irad's 0 for 15 in these races, but I mean, I'm interested, right? I mean, you may get more than 9-2 here, right? I mean, it feels like it.
Depends on where the European money lands. It's gonna be interesting. This is gonna be, if there's no scratch in this race, yeah, it'll be very interesting to see. I don't even know where to begin to predict that.
It's an exciting race. This is a good race. I mean, there are a lot of good races. This is a really good, fun race. I mean, that's all you can say.
I mean, it's a good race, so much so that I'm, all in on Nation's Pride and ran basically the same race as Ohana Honor last time. And so I'm completely throwing out a 15-1 shot that finished ahead of him on the money last time. So it's just a deep race, I think, with a lot of angles to look at.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, I mean, and also, I mean, that Ohana Honor, I mean, West Point, Shug, that feels like a Saratoga winner to me. I don't know. There's a lot of good stuff here. All right, let's move on to the Belmont. The main event, 1.25 miles, not 1.5 miles this year. In a lot of ways, just to kind of open this discussion, I was thinking about it. We're in the unique position of being able to see some of these 3-year-olds running their second race at 1.25 miles in the past 5 weeks, which is like pretty interesting. I mean, you kind of have a little bit of a baseline, right? You kind of know what they can do, albeit this field is half the size of the Derby field. So in that way, I mean, maybe it's a sort of an easier puzzle to solve, but in another way, this is always the Belmont. I thought the one hack of the Belmont was that you could kind of rely almost strictly on pedigree, and you could identify those couple of bloodlines that you're like, yeah, this horse is not going to make 1.5, or the opposite, right? Like, this horse is definitely suited for this. Maybe you can't do that as much here. A lot of interesting horses to consider. We're going to go through the whole field at some point here over the next couple of minutes. And interesting to see that my man Corey here has landed. He's going back to the well, but hey, look, not going back to the well in a horse that disappointed or anything. This horse ran a massive Derby. And Corey, I understand you're going back to your boy Resilience.
Yeah, I feel like this is just a replay of the Kentucky Derby podcast in some ways, and I'm going to go back to the well again, and I'm going to talk about Resilience. So anybody that listened to that episode, I got 32-1 in the Derby and took the lead at the top of the stretch, thought he might go on, did not, got beaten, finished 6th that day, but ran a really credible race at those odds for Belmont. And, I love the way that Mott kind of was hedging whether he was going to run here, whether he was going to enter here. There were other options. And then he puts the horse in after that work on Sunday. And I'll talk about that work on Sunday because I think it's really an interesting one to really key off of a bit. But yeah, he's always been a great workhorse, but there was something special about that one too. But I'm going to go back in here at 10-1. So I'm getting Resilience at 10-1 in the 2-hole. I'm going to go back to the Kentucky Derby. And if we look at that GPS chart for the Derby, Resilience ran a really good race as far wide as he was the entire trip. So I love one of the features of the Equibase GPS charts is that you can look at the actual, feet traveled around the race. And if you look at Resilience, he traveled the 3rd farthest of any horse in that field at 6,666 feet. He was clearly beaten that day by Mystic Dan and Sierra Leone. No question about it. They were a better horse that day. But he ran 35 more feet than Sierra Leone and 58 more feet than Mystic Dan in that race, who had the perfect trip up the rail and saved all the ground. So I'm hoping that it's a little less stressful from the two posts this time. Brazilians doesn't have to go quite as wide around the track this whole mile and a quarter. And he's going to break from the 2-hole, and which I really like. Here we go, Pramana Lab stat lines. When we pull up the 2-hole post position at a mile and a quarter on dirt at Saratoga, over the last 3 years, post position 2, go back to the last one over the last 3 years, if you would, please. But post position 2 over the last 3 years wins it 40% of the time, 8 of 20, 15 times in the money. So that's a pretty good clip for horses in the 2 position going a mile and a quarter on the dirt at Saratoga. So if I can get 40% winners from any post position, I'm happy. And if my horse at 10-1 sits there, I'm going to be pretty thrilled. So I'm going back with that horse. On the converse, history's a little bit against Sierra Leone in the post 9 over the past decade. At that same distance, 10 furlongs on the dirt at Saratoga, 0 for 10. The post number 9, the favorite Sierra Leone, that post has never won in the last decade at that distance on the dirt. So that's something you look at. And post positions, they do matter when they come into play at a distance like this in that configuration. So the reason I'm going back on Resilience is obviously multifold, but one of them is the work on Sunday. It was just an eye-catching number, and according to the clockers, came home in 22 and change. And that's a pretty fast work for Belmont. I feel like that shows a little bit of confidence. I think he's ready for his best. I think he'll run a trip that's less compromised. Mott has done this pattern before, winning the Wood with Tacitus and then losing in the Derby, sitting out the Preakness, coming back and running a really nice second in the Belmont. Mott knows this move. Brazilians fits the pattern. I'm going all in at 10-1 on Resilience to run a much better race, not to have 20 horses around and be right there in the photo at the end. With that said, I feel like we're right back at the Derby again because I'm going to go with Sierra Leone underneath. Not a lot of price, but clearly I think the best horse in the field. Probably should have won the Derby. I don't think there's any question about it. If he stays straight, he does. He'll come running late. Should really be undefeated in his career if he stayed straight. Numbers are just better than every other horse. He's going to have to overcome that 9 post, but probably has the talent to do it. And one other thing that I think was interesting, when you go look at what Chad Brown did by putting Pratt on the horse from Tyler Gaffalione, he's done this before 4 times, moving from Gaffalione to Pratt. He's got a win, a place, a show, 3 in the money. So done it before, won it before. So we'll see. And so I do think he'll probably run up in there, be second, probably maybe even win. But I do think he'll be in the photo. And I'm going to use Seize the Gray underneath a bit because I think he's going to take him as far as he can. We overlook him every single time. Scott was on him last time, so I think Scott knew that horse was ready to just go out on the lead and go as far as he could. And Baffert's horse ran a really weird race, so I'm not exactly sure what to make of it. But I don't think he can win, and I'll give you another stat for it. Dwayne Lucas hasn't won a dirt race at a mile or longer at Saratoga since July 26, 2018, when Lafille Verte won a maiden claiming race at 9 furlongs, and he's 0 for 15 since. Last time he won a stakes race at a mile or longer on the Saratoga dirt was with Will Take Charge in the 2013 Travers. So recency does not speak well for Seize the Gray to hold on and win the race, but doesn't mean he can't run up for a piece at a decent price and get a little bit overlooked, even though he just won the Preakness. And the last thing I'm going to do before I pass this over to the other folks that know more about horse racing than I'll ever know is toss the Pletchers. I'm going to toss the 3 Todd Pletchers in this race. And that narrowed down the list for me because you got to find a place to take stands. And I know he's got 3 horses, Mindframe being the one with all the steam at 7-2, Antiquarian 12-1, and Protective at 20-1. For Antiquarian and Protective, history doesn't really help them. And I'm going to do a morning line thing again. Pletcher's just 1 for 83 in Saratoga Stakes races over the past 10 years with horses that are 10-1 or higher morning line. And 64 of those ran out of the money. 1 for 83. That's interesting, and I think that's compelling. So if you look at Antiquarian and Protective, that definitely plays against him. And the reason I'm throwing Mindframe at 7-2 out is he ran 2 really, really nice races. And he was ultra comfortable in that last race and that allowance race. And he kind of pulled away, as he should have, setting those fractions. But history also not on Mindframe's side. Since 2013, Pletcher has made this move, taking a horse from allowance to a grade 1 18 times. He's never won. 0 for 18, running out 13 times. So I am using some of these Pramana stat lines to try to figure out ways to look at angles that may not be apparent in the past performances, but also might be hidden in the data to say, okay, maybe it's just a little too steep of a move up for that horse from the outside in mind frame. So if you toss the Pletchers, I'm going to play Resilience to win in place for sure. I'm going to play Sierra Leone. Obviously, there's money there with Resilience, and try to figure out a way to get those two to finish in the top two. And then go from there with some other multi-race wagers, ending there with pick fours and some in-race exotics as well. But Resilience will be the horse that if he's there at 10 to 1 or more, I think that's where your value comes in this race for me.
Nice. I like how granular you got with the Pletcher stat. In a few moments, I'm going to show a Pletcher stat for mind frame, which is not nearly as specific as the criteria you outlined, where I thought, hey, I can make a case for mind frame. But just real quick, Corey, before we move on to some of the other horses, like we're all looking at these stats. These are like, especially the post position stats. How do we get those stats? Like how do we get access to those?
Got it. So Pramana Stat Lines does several things, one of which is we create stat lines of just betting narratives that are written like sentences or paragraph form that are produced automatically every night for every race at every track, everywhere, every day. And so when you go to your Equibase entries, at every track, when you click on the entries, there'll be a little Pramana Stat Lines icon, and you click on it, and it'll give you some insights about that race and those trainers and those distances and those surfaces and those trainer movements and all of the stuff you might want to get. I'm giving a little bit on top, a little bit more than those give, but as we move forward, you'll be seeing a lot of those inside your stat lines that'll be compelling for horses that fit those characteristics of those races. So I'm digging a little bit deeper, but a lot of what I've given you is available in those Pramana stat lines for every race.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, to me, listening to you, it's like, especially if you're like kind of between two horses or whatever it might be, or maybe you're trying to eliminate a horse and you're like, you hear one of these stats where a certain post position at a certain distance over a certain surface is, 0 for 27. Like, well, I mean, I'm kind of, maybe I won't use this horse. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's good. It's kind of, it's another set of data that I think, for people who do this all the time, I mean, it's really good stuff. So,
Dan, if we were all on the same horse, we wouldn't make any money, right? I mean, everybody has to find their own angles and everybody has to figure out where their convictions are. And sometimes you can be biased because you're searching for something to fit your conviction. And other times you can see a stat and you can just say, okay, well, that actually changed everything I thought before because numbers and data actually matter. And so the whole goal of Pramana Labs integration with the Equibase database is that we can find hidden nuggets that you as horse players or all three of us in this or four of us on this podcast that have looked at horse racing forever may not be readily apparent. And when you can dig in at a granular level, data doesn't lie a lot of times. And you need both the traditional and the data driven to be able to make popular opinions be valid data decisions. And that's what I think we do here.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right, Scott, Sierra Leone is the horse we have on screen right now. This is your top pick at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, only because Fierceness isn't here. I fully expected to have a repeat of that show too, and he was on that perfect every other pattern. I was ready.
Yep.
So here we go with Sierra Leone. I don't have anything clever. When looking at the PPs, I just think this horse is better than the rest of these horses. I mean, some cool things that you can see here is the projected ratings and pace. I mean, third. It's like what people are expecting Sierra Leone if he loses to be too far away. I mean, his average pace early is third in this field. I mean, this field is not going to be burnt. It's not going to be like a hot pace, I don't think. You never know. I mean, they're still human. Jockeys can do something crazy stuff. There are chances for a pace duel, but I mean, in all reality, some of the numbers where Sierra Leone's really far back are just because the paces were super hot, and he doesn't have to be that far back. He's got the best middle pace, the best late pace. He's got Flavian Pratt. I think that's an important switch. I mean, Tyler's good, but I mean, Flavian Pratt, I think he's the best dirt jockey we have. I mean, I just think he always makes the right decision. I think he is just gonna get this horse to relax and just kind of maybe put him in the race a little bit better. I'm hoping. We've got if you go to if you actually first, if you look at the figures, another thing I like with younger horses of pairing figures, you see that 99, 98, and then you see a 107, 109. And then based on that pattern, a lot of times you'll see another move forward this young. And that's what I'm hoping happens when you kind of pair those figures up and then you just look for the next jump. And if he takes a jump kind of like he did last time or even part of it, I mean, I just think he's just much the horse to beat, even with the current numbers. So there's a lot to like there. He's on the improve by Gun Runner. I mean, there's just Gun Runner was a late bloomer and got really good. I mean, obviously, as we all saw, I mean, to the point of like, I was so surprised by how good Gun Runner got based on like how he ran early in his 3-year-old career and how he ran late. There's just a ton to like for me. If you go to the True Odds screen and adjust by True Odds, I mean, Racelands agrees, which makes me think I don't even want to see what price we're going to get. Worried that 9 to 5 is not going to hold. But Racelands agrees with a pretty big advantage. They think the fair odds are 7 to 2, but next closest is Mystic Dan at 8 to 1. And I just think Sierra Leone's a better horse. I think got the tougher of the trips on Derby Day, obviously, and has not had to run that middle leg, just coming in fresh. And if you sort by late pace, he's got a pretty decent sized advantage over Mindframe as well. For me, I just think this is going to be my only A horse in like the horizontal pick 4, pick 5, pick 3s, daily doubles, whatever I end up doing. And then, I mean, the other one that scares me, I guess, the most is Mindframe. Corey's stats put me at ease a little bit on that, but I mean, defensively, probably going to use Mindframe just because, I mean, I think they paid 600,000. I think DRF had in their PPs that paid 600,000 for the horse, kind of brought along slowly, but I mean, there's a lot of talent there, but has had absolutely everything his own way. So we just don't know. You just have no idea. Like, this is a horse that I use defensively because I have no idea. The talent is there, but is stepping up after having everything their own way. I mean, a lot of horses can't just jump into a grade 1 to win here, but I would hate to get completely knocked out by the horse. So we'll see how I'm doing. And if I can use the horse defensively, I will. Other than that, I'm just going to be all Sierra Leone.
Interesting. Yeah, Mindframe. That debut race, I mean, didn't really, I don't know, didn't really break all that well and kind of race from off the pace a little bit. And obviously they weren't going this far, but you know, the follow up, the first level allowance, I mean, really had things his own way. We could dig into Mindframe a little bit more. I know Christina is kind of a little bit of a blend here of opinions with Sierra Leone and a little bit of Mindframe, but start us off with Sierra Leone, Christina.
Yeah, a little bit of both for me. I kind of went back and forth with those two as I was debating for my final selection. And I'm replaying the Derby podcast as well because Sierra Leone was my Derby horse. So if I loved him in the Derby, how can I not love him coming back at the 1.25 miles again here in the Belmont? I did pull a little research because I think there's 2 changes here that are noteworthy. And I love Tyler Gaffleon, so I don't mean this as any slight on his ability, but I think Chad Brown, you know, was a big part of the reason that Flavien Prat even decided to take his tack back east, because he had the support of a big barn like that in the last couple of years. And so you look at them teaming up in graded stakes races, 26% win rate, 56% in the money. And one of the things about Flavien is just how strong he is. He's really, really strong and constantly in the gym, kind of working on his upper body strength. The second thing that they are changing, and we can take a look at the last 1/4 mile of the Derby while I talk about this, because we've all seen it a million times, the way he gets in, the way he lugs in, and he did this in the Bluegrass. And luckily, you know, there was nobody to the left of him to have to worry about, but he and Forever Young really leaning on each other the entire length of the stretch. And you can see once he's kind of engaged like that, he gets a little colty and he does it even more. He really leans back further to the left. So what they've done is they're going to change his bit for the Belmont. What he was running in and what most horses run in are called a snaffle bit or a D bit. And the kind of key terminology with regard to snaffle bits is that they're flexible, that they move kind of this way. So when you are on a horse, as you apply pressure with a snaffle bit, you're just engaging that one side of the bit because it moves. Or you're, you know, turning this way, you're engaging the other side. And it can also kind of slide back and forth a little bit in their mouth. They're switching him to a Houghton bit, which is also called a cage bit at times. It's a straight bar. And it's covered in rubber. And then there's also another kind of piece that goes under their chin to hold it in place. And when you start turning with a Houghton bit, you engage the entire bit because it's straight. So it's like power steering, essentially. Some horses go really well in a Houghton bit. Some horses hate it. Some horses, even if they're strong and they're tough, they still go better in a snaffle. They have tried this with him, and I found this really interesting in reading articles. They actually tried it last year, and Chad didn't really love the way he was training, and so they went back to the snaffle. They've tried it again recently, and as he's a little older, it's going better, and he's responded to it much better now. So I think the combination of a really strong finisher like Flavien Prat, this new bit, hopefully he's going to run straight. I talk about it a lot on FanDuel. Anytime you're correcting a horse, you're not going as fast as you can. So if they don't have to correct him and he's rolling down the middle of the racetrack, he could be better than what we've seen. And so that's what brought me back to Sierra Leone, on top of some of the other kind of statistics and just his overall record and what we've seen from him so far. I do think Mind Frame is interesting. I really liked his replays. I know he's had things his own way, but he's just a bull out there. And I mean that in a good way. Whereas you have Sierra Leone with this real kind of tenacious ability from off the pace. This horse has that tactical speed, ears pinned. He's strong, he's powerful, and he accelerates like a turf horse on the dirt. You can see the acceleration here at Churchill in his last race. I don't have any concern about him rating from that outside post. I think they're going to send Seize the Gray. I think we've seen that he's his best version of himself when he's on the lead. So I think he can rate. And I don't have any concern about the distance. As a son of Constitution, Constitution has already sired a Belmont winner at the 1.5 miles with Tis the Law. Constitution, a son of Tappet. We've seen so many Belmont winners through that line. So it is a lot to ask. He is very short on experience, but I think he's a real special horse. And I think he's probably going to start to really put it together in the second half of the season. But I'm coming back to Sierra Leone as the top pick, Dan, mostly for just those changes that I think could have enough of a difference that we finally see his best.
Yeah, the education on the bits was interesting. I didn't know
I
the
have them
difference.
downstairs. If you want to see them, I could show you.
Yeah, I mean, we could stall. I mean, you could definitely, if you want to run down and
Yeah,
actually, yeah, go for it.
I'll
I
grab
think
it. You
that'd be
guys
cool
keep
to see.
talking.
All right, that's awesome. So, yeah, just listening to that, I was like, my other question is like, what if the horse is just nuts? Maybe it has nothing to do with the bit. Maybe he's just wild. But no, it'd be interesting to get some sort of visual representation. I will kind of pick up where Christina left off on Mind Frame. Very curious about this horse. Now, like, I don't want this horse at like 5-2 though. I mean, but I feel like this horse is probably going to be 3-1 or less, is probably the second choice. I'm not too excited about making his third start in in what's been a pretty solid field. I mean, you got the Preakness winner, you got the Derby winner. I don't really want too short of a price. The stat that I pulled up on Pletcher, which I didn't think was all that bad, again, you can kind of the one that Corey provided was a lot more specific to Saratoga. But just in terms of Todd Pletcher, the past 5 years, going from allowance to stakes races, and specifically just graded stakes, is not grade ones in particular, you're still getting a 15% win percentage, 43% in the money, and a positive ROI. So framed in this light, a little better, not as dire. But we shall see. I mean, the horse certainly looks like he has the ability. Scott mentioned the $600,000 purchase, and really the fact that he's won by 20 plus lengths in those first two starts is a sign of some talent. Okay, Christina's back. Let us see the bits.
Honey. This is more than we bargained for on this podcast, on this webinar. So this is the snaffle. This is what most horses are going to run in, and you can see how it changes, right? It's flexible. And again, if you pull this rein, you're engaging that side of the bit and it'll move back and forth. This is the Houghton. You can see that bar. That black bar is what goes in their mouth. That's rubber. This is what goes underneath their chin. And as you start to pull, you're going to pull the whole bit back and forth for more control.
And you said Sierra Leone didn't like that one initially?
Not as a 2-year-old, it sounded like Chad mentioned, but you would never just put this on race day and hope for the best. They have been training in it, and he has gone better in it already. So they're not experimenting.
Got it. Got it.
right in the race.
That's interesting. Okay. That is interesting. And do you I know you said, I mean, Pratt is a, when I think strong finishers, I mean, Pratt is up there. I mean, I think Rosario would probably be my number one, finisher. Do you think it really is more this equipment, or do you really think it is like, look, they just needed some real strong jockey to get this horse to.
I think it's more the equipment. I mean,
Okay.
because I think that Tyler Gaffleon is equally as strong and an excellent, finisher as well. But I think when you're dealing with a horse like this who's so strong and you're going, sometimes, especially colts, you really need to be a little stronger with them, really tell them what to do rather than like with a filly trying to convince them or finesse them into what you're trying to get. I think he just needs some stronger handling, and with that comes some stronger equipment.
Okay, that's awesome stuff. Again, thank you for that demo. That was really, really cool. I'm gonna throw out one long shot here, and then I want to kind of go around the room and maybe we look through some of these other horses. We talk about ways to find some bigger prices, maybe again in your exactas. But I like Dornock. I mean, I know. Maybe I'm crazy. There's no pace in this race, with the exception of Seize the Gray. It's pretty clear. Look at Dornock's numbers. I mean, the 102 Equibase speed for your career best on the lead, the 99, the 99, and the Remsen, and the Sapling. I mean, all of those races when he's on the lead, he runs his best. It's pretty simple. When he's not on the lead, he just can't pass horses. And obviously he had all that trouble in the Derby. You see on the side those red markers, the trouble indicators, shows you, in the Derby he's obviously shuffled back. And we knew that he was going to have those issues from the one post. And every year we make excuses, at least recently for the one post. We're like, okay, well, with the new gate and it's not as close to the rail and he'll have time. You don't. I mean, unless you're a certain kind of horse, you're going to have some issues. Now, Sierra Leone from the two post, deep closer, not an issue. This is not a deep closer. Dornock needs to be somewhat forwardly placed or just entirely on the lead. I would hope that they've sort of figured that out at this point, and Luis Saez is going to just send. You've got the evidence in the PPs and in all the previous races with Dornock. You also have the evidence from the Preakness that if you leave Seize the Gray alone, he's a quality horse. He's going to run off with the race. So I think Dornock is going. I think he's fast enough to be alone on the lead. At the very least, he should be putting some serious pressure on Seize the Gray. And I think Dornock, I mean, if I get 15 to 1, I'd be thrilled, and maybe I will. I think he's a lock to finish top 3. I mean, I've never been a big Dornock guy, but I'm into Dornock in this spot. If anyone completely agrees or thinks I'm an absolute lunatic, feel free to speak up.
I think he's one of those horses that when he's on the inside and he's engaged, he's very talented. He beat Sierra Leone like that. He battled back against him, beat him, in the Remsen. So can't forget that. We haven't talked about the Derby winner. I mean, Mystic Dan ran a great race to be second in the Preakness. So I would say not to be forgotten about. And I think he will be at the windows. You'll probably get that 5 or 6 to 1. You'll get the casual bettors that are, betting him back because he won the Derby, but Mystic Dan is still improving, I think. I just wouldn't forget about him.
And how mind-blowing it, like Derby winner, second in the Preakness, is going to get another wet track, which obviously he loves. And he's 5 to 1 in the morning line. I mean, and he's going to go off probably as third choice, which is just wild. We have any Mystic Dan takers in here, other than Christina, potentially?
I'm definitely using in second and third. I prefer Sierra Leone. And I don't want to. I don't know how I'm gonna create my tickets yet, but unless the sloppier it gets, the better though. Like Mystic Dan, like I had him. I was actually couldn't believe he won how he did in a fast track on Derby Day. But I mean, I had always had this horse circled as done some pretty. I mean that race in the Southwest and the slop was like crazy. I mean the horse loves the wet track. So I mean, we'll see what the weather brings. I mean you've always got to be adjusting, and it's just one that I'll have moving way up if there is a lot of rain.
Yeah, in the same way you got to move Seize the Gray up if there's a lot of rain too. So that would be one you got to look at as well. So I think the weather will be will make a bit of the race time decisions. Hopefully it doesn't come in the middle of the multi-race wagers that have already been played, but that's always something you got to worry about.
Yep.
The 4-horse, the Wine Steward, second to Antiquarian, who we could talk about 4 and 5 together, Antiquarian and the Wine Steward. I don't know. I mean, is this horse just a cut below? I mean, the horse obviously started out really nice. I think coming into this year had high hopes for this horse, and he's kind of just been even in his performances. The Wine Steward. Any interest in this horse?
I mean,
Nothing.
two back. I don't have any interest in this spot, but two back. Obviously, he comes out of the Lexington where he finished second to Encina, who I really liked going into Derby before he got scratched. So you kind of have to look at those things and value them. But then I watched the Peter Pan, and I just thought all 3 of those horses are a cut below everybody in this race. I just wasn't impressed by the way that the stretch run was. I know Protective seemed to have trouble and had to switch out, but none of those 3 I think make an impact in this race just from my handicapping standpoint.
Yeah, race the toss for me. I mean, if you want to play savers, I mean, you might, and if the race turns out to be much better than I think, then you might want to start throwing them all in different spots because they might be. But for me, I'm tossing that race.
Yeah, and I'm just asking you because I'm thinking like I'm just looking for maybe exactas and if you want to have a lot of fun, maybe trifectas. But I mean, Christina, any interest in any of those horses coming out of the Peter Pan for you?
I don't think so. I think if I'm looking, like we say, underneath, it's horses like Mindframe, horses like Seize the Gray, who's improving, resilience, as we've heard from Corey, lots to like about him, especially off that last work. So not for me for the Peter Pan runners.
Okay, and the only other horse to touch on is the 8-horse Honor Marie. I think much has been made about the trip that he had in the Derby. Not a great trip at all. Prior to that, had really done a nice job closing from off the pace. Gets a new jockey. I believe Ben Curtis was injured, right? And that's why Florent Giroux is up. I think Giroux has been on him in the morning, and all words, everything I've heard is that obviously a good fit on the horse and everything else. We talked about the pace, right? This horse, it obviously seems extremely pace dependent. Also doesn't seem like as strong of a closer as Sierra Leone, for example. So now, are you going to hope for 2 horses? I know Scott made the case Sierra Leone's not going to be 40 lengths back, but he might be a little more forwardly placed. Honor Marie, I think, is going to be way back, right? I mean, Honor Marie doesn't stay close at all. I don't know. Scott, what do you think? Honor Marie, any shot underneath?
I liked Honor Marie on Derby Day and definitely took some money. I mean, went off at just under 15 to 1. Yeah, I think there's a shot in 3rd or 4th. I mean, if things heat up, I mean, if Mindframe decides to get up there also with Dornoch and Seize the Gray, I mean, you could see a little bit of a goofier setup, but I think, I mean, I feel like 3rd's Honor Marie's ceiling for me, and that if I really get deep into the tries, I just, like you said, it's going to be tough with that running style.
Yeah, and I just think if you look at it, where does he fit? I just don't know where he fits. Sierra Leone's a better closer. There's plenty of other horses that have more talent here. I think there's more horses that are, if you look at his 2 back, in the Louisiana Derby, lost to Catching Freedom, who has shown the ceiling Catching Freedom's got in his 2 races. Decent, but that's the ceiling. Mystic Dan, Seize the Gray, clearly beat him last time. Tuscan Gold, we were all over, kind of just show where Tuscan Gold is. I just think that race is not hugely validating, and I just don't see where he fits amongst these. I think there's others that just have a much higher ceiling than that one.
Yeah, it's a good point. Checking out the company lines too. Yeah, definitely is nothing there that's too encouraging. Christina, I'll give you the last word here as we go around on Honor Marie or anything else you'd like to say to button up this Belmont field.
No, I agree with what we've said. I think he's always right there behind Catching Freedom, and Catching Freedom's always right there for 4th or 5th, right? So once the real big boys kind of show up, Honor Marie ends up getting shuffled back a little bit. He's a nice horse and he could continue to improve, but I think he needs to get quite a bit better to beat some of these.
All right. Well, we've covered 5 of the 15 stakes races on tap for this weekend in Saratoga, Belmont Stakes weekend. It's going to be memorable. It's going to be just absolutely spectacular. hope that as you're watching this, you picked up a couple of little nuggets that you could use throughout the weekend. And if you're like, hey, I wanna explore a little bit more. I need a little bit more information. Like I heard a couple of interesting things, but I need to do a little more digging. Just a reminder that right now on Equibase, there are specials for $99. You can get unlimited Equibase TPs, quarterly past performances for 99 bucks. You could also get unlimited quarterly access to Race Lens, the very product you are looking at right now, where you've seen all these features, where you can do all these customized searches, and you could literally figure out everything you need in one hub. And you've also got quick access to replays and pace projectors. And then don't forget, I mean, as Corey's been going through the Pramana Lab stat lines, just so much great information that you can dig into as you're navigating here in the lead up to the Belmont Stakes and Belmont Stakes weekend. So if you have questions, we're always around. You can find us on social media. You can reach out and share those questions, and we'll be, obviously we'll get back to you. The other thing is, in terms of opportunities this weekend, we put you on a couple of long shots. We put you on a couple of horses who we think are potentially locks, and you can key and pick fives and that sort of thing. But as far as your wagering, if you want to make a bet without any concern, you're like, you know what? Hey, let me make a big bet. You got the no sweat first bet of up to $500 from FanDuel Racing. Even if you're a current TBG account holder, you could still sign up for FanDuel Racing, and all new customers will get that $500 no sweat first bet. So a great weekend to take advantage of it. The more I think about it, I think if you find a price, you should definitely do that. And then you get the credit, your money back that you can kind of maybe lay on more of a sure thing. So that's been this is it. So 15 stakes races this weekend. We will be back at some point soon. This is the third of 3 Triple Crown shows presented by FanDuel Racing. We want to thank them for sponsoring this show, allowing us to do this, and thank you to my amazing co-hosts and handicappers, Christina Blacker, Scott Coles, and Corey Patton. This has been a lot of fun. We will see all of you very, very soon. And for this weekend, we wish you much luck.